Hey everybody, welcome back to A Higher Future. I'm UBC Mignetti, and as always, I'm joined by Dr. Nicole Gravagna. Hi.
Good morning, Yubi. Who are we talking to today?
So today we're talking to Alykhan Rehmatullah. He's the VP of Content Strategy at iCIMS, and iCIMS is a fellow local Colorado company. They're an applicant tracking system, and they're turning out to be a really great partner for Interview IA. But the reason we're talking, well, first of all, hi, Alykhan, how are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason we wanted to connect was that partnership, but I'd love to hear first, like how you got to become a part of iCIMS and what it is that you brought to iCIMS, what your company brought to iCIMS, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. On a high level, we started what was, Altru Labs about 3 years ago in the space, which is a employee generated video technology. So companies use our product to source video stories from their employees. We gave those companies the ability to edit, brand, and approve those videos, and then ultimately to distribute them into their really talent attraction experience. So that's on career sites, job descriptions, email, and social media. The reason I bring that up is because from an iCIMS perspective, iCIMS has a number of different technologies across the funnel of the candidate experience, right? ATS, career sites, chatbots, text recruit, et cetera. And a big thesis that we had, that I think both organizations had, was that if we can humanize the experience and even consumerize the experience for candidates through our people, it would make for not only iCIMS product to be stronger, but also for us and our impact to be significantly larger in a significantly shorter amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. We had about 120 enterprise companies that we worked with pre-acquisition. iCIMS has over 4,500 companies now to date, right? So we're able to really broaden our impact in a relatively short amount of time, and then even strengthen the overall product of both companies too.
Well, I think what's interesting, you started about 3 years ago, so obviously pre-COVID. Yep. What was the importance of video back then? And then because I want to go into like, why is it even more important now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer that first question first. When we were starting the company, we felt like there were a number of really consumer marketing initiatives that were making their way into talent acquisition in a 3 to 5 year lag is what I usually see, right? So you think about like personalized shopping experiences, and that led to the career sites and CRMs out there to create a personalized shopping experience for the candidate's job search. Then there's a number of chatbots that you interact with on the consumer side. Now there are chatbots in TA, right? So the inflection point that we saw at that time was this idea of influencer marketing. So in consumer, this to be the way companies market their products through people instead of, let's say, TV commercials. And we felt that in talent acquisition, it's actually more relevant to have that strategy, because in TA, we know that your candidates trust your people significantly more than they trust your company. There's this LinkedIn stat that candidates trust your employees 3 times more than they trust your company to deliver credible information on what it's like to work there, right? So when we saw that shift in influencer marketing, we said, well, we should actually bring that here, right? Because in TA, unlike influencer marketing on consumer, I don't sell you a product, right? I don't sell you this watch. I don't sell you anything specific. I sell you the employee's experience, right? Which is best delivered by the employee. So that was kind of the opportunity that we saw, and fortunately being one of the first to market.
Yeah.
This reminds me of when I was shopping for colleges, and I went to visit a college, and one of the students that was there came to me, and she says, "It's terrible here. Don't come here." And I was like, "Okay,
yeah,
I don't need to hear any more." Yeah, that it is a very powerful thing to hear the experience of someone who is literally in the middle of experiencing it.
Yeah, well, and I think to that point, right, I think that specific example that you just gave, Nicole, is super interesting. And it almost reminds me a little bit more of like Glassdoor, right? Where Glassdoor has these polarizing reviews that you go to. They're either super positive or super negative, when in reality, right, it's somewhere in between that. right? And the way that we, convey this to companies is that, Glassdoor, while they've built a really effective business, they provide value almost off of fear to companies, right? You have to like take your competition and their jobs off. You have to try to moderate your reviews. Whereas what we try to do with our companies is you can now play offense with user-generated content, right? Companies can get feedback from their employees on what it's like to work there. They can approve that content, and they can dictate, what content actually gets distributed as well. So it gives companies this idea of like parental oversight, right, on their talent attraction strategy.
How does it actually work? So if let's say we were going to use this at Interview IA, and we're going to hand this out to our current employees, what would their experience be in documenting their experience as an employee?
Yeah, good question. So there's a few different ways on how we do this, right? We've got a mobile app, we've got a desktop web application as well, or like just through the web browsers. You don't have to download anything. Effectively, what happens here is companies create prompts for their employees, like describe how you've grown your career here, or what were your first 30 days like here? Who's your closest peer at work, and what projects have you worked on with them, right? How are you supported from a diversity perspective? I mean, a number of different questions and prompts based on specific themes. They then nominate specific employees to answer those specific prompts or questions. And employees quite literally get a push notification to their phone, or they get an email. They swipe into our application. They see the prompt. The company can have talking points, right, on what they want the employee to acknowledge or discuss, and they convey their story, and that is then sent to the company for approval, right? So after the employee's video is created, it's sent for approval. The company, they can go in to review it. They can even edit and brand the content. So we have kind of like an Instagram style editor where you can add logos, text boxes, images. You can stitch together different videos of different employees' perspectives. And then they can tag that content and ensure it's distributed in the right way. So you can distribute on your career site. You can map these videos to job descriptions. So if Nicole is a software engineer, then her video gets linked to a software engineering job description for personalization. We could also do this on social media and through email communications as well.
How do you handle a company could, in theory, choose the wrong employees, where even though it sounds like they're saying very positive things, or it sounds like it might be a good description of what's happening in the company, that in fact it backfires. Is there a way for you to pre-test the content before it goes out to new candidates?
Yeah, I mean, the pre-test is the approval process, right? Like employees create the videos and they're sent to the company for approval. And so it's up to the company to review those videos and approve them, as I mentioned.
Yeah. But, I mean, I guess there's always sort of a psychology behind it. Like you might say like, oh, they're saying the right thing about our company, but then, it goes out into the world and it's something that doesn't land right on an audience. Is there anything that you can do to prevent that?
Yeah,
you can take the video down.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good question.
It's like I mean, just candidly speaking, from a pure technology standpoint, when you put something out in the ether, it's out in the ether, right? Yeah. And you can take it down. I get where you're coming at, but I don't think the question is phrased right. I think what I would mention here is that we always encourage our companies to, it's not just about invoking positivity in a response from an employee, right? You don't want the employee to be inauthentic on what it's like to work at the company, right? Actually, the best videos that we see from a data perspective are the videos where the employee presents a challenge, right, or a limitation that they had, and how they were able to overcome that challenge and limitation, right? Maybe it's a project that they worked on. Maybe it was difficult for them to network at the company and find their peer group, right? And what the company did to allow the employee to get through that challenge and see it as an opportunity and a solution. I think oftentimes we have to encourage our companies to understand it's you can't just be purely positive, because the only thing that's worse than not filling a vacant role is filling that role and then having that employee have a false assumption on what it's like to work here and them churning or leaving after a month or 2 months. It actually costs the company a lot more than just having a vacant role out there. So we do try to encourage this level of authenticity, and you have to both filter in and filter out, right? It's working at Amazon is not for everyone, right? But it is rewarding, and it is for top performers, right? And there's a element of rigor at working at those top tier companies that don't exist amongst others. And that's not for everyone, but it could be the perfect place for somebody. And that challenge could be something that a specific employee or an individual wants to go through from a growth standpoint as well.
Are you measuring like sentiment and things like that from like what kind of data are you getting to know that it's working, other than making the right hire and things like that? But
yeah, of course. So from a data standpoint, there's kind of two ways that we look at it. First is we actually measure sentiment analysis on the video that the employee creates. So what happens when the employee creates the video, our technology actually runs closed captions on the video. So we have the entire transcript of what the employee said. We actually run that through IBM Watson. So IBM Watson has what's called a tone analyzer technology, where you can input sentences into Watson, and they will then show both positive and negative sentiments coming from the employee. So when you think about doing this at enterprise organizations where you might have hundreds or thousands of videos coming in at once, Watson gives you a sentiment grade from A to F, if you will, on how effective the video is from a positive, negative standpoint, right? So that's kind of one element of it, right, for the company. But then secondly, for the candidate, right, and how do we enable companies to measure their ROI, which was part of your question as well, is we layer on top. So whenever the platform of choice, we layer on top of the career site or the CRM or the ATS, right? So we look at all of the kind of measuring points that the company had been going through before the video studio was on board. So you think about time on site, how much time can it spend on site, conversion rates on the job descriptions, the video duration viewed to completion, right? So how much of that video was viewed until another action was taken, or how many videos are viewed per session as well. So we look at the statistics and the data that the company was measuring before, and then we see what's the delta effect, right? So we've seen up to a 34% increase on conversion rates on the job description. So we see up to a 37% increase of time spent on the career site. So candidates just investing more in learning about the company's brand. And then lastly, we see a pretty significant spike in SEO traffic as well. So when you're able to embed video content on your career site, differentiated across your different job descriptions, well, then Google starts to take notice, right? Because Google gives video a significantly higher SEO score than it gives text or images. So our companies benefit from an organic search standpoint as well.
You've really taken the marketing and sales process into attracting candidates, which when you talk about it like this, it seems kind of obvious, but it's not obvious at all. People don't think about candidates as a customer in any way, and you really do. You're treating this as though they're shopping for their next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think many companies have started to. You're absolutely right, Nicole. I'd agree that talent acquisition has been late to the game in treating candidates as customers, right? And then you look at it like to consumer companies, like we work with like CBS, right, and Wells Fargo, and a number of direct to consumer companies, and their candidates are actually their customers, right? Like I go to CBS on a biweekly basis, right? And so if I have a bad experience as a candidate, that might impact my purchasing decisions, right? So I think what really we stumbled upon was the fact that, it's important to treat your candidates as customers, sure. But when we looked at the content that companies were creating when we first started the company, it was primarily like professional video production, right? So our number one competition was professional agencies that would come into the office and create professional videos for companies, right? And I look at those videos, and I would say we look at those videos and we say, well, that looks like a TV commercial, right? It's very inauthentic, it's very scripted, and it's not really giving me any real insight on what the company, like the company is not this beautiful utopia, right? That you like step into, and everything is just amazing, right? And so we looked at that and we said, well, actually, companies need authenticity, right? And that authenticity comes from user generated content, right? Where it's not the most polished video, right? It's not going to be a TV commercial for the Super Bowl, but it allows for the candidate. The candidate doesn't want to be sold to; they want to get a better understanding on what it's like to work at the company. And I think what happened, and Yubi kind of alluded to this earlier on the conversation, is when COVID hit last March, well, the companies couldn't hire the professional video agencies to come to their office because no one was in the office, right? Everyone was at home, and they needed a way to engage with their employees and their candidates, right? And as long as you have, a phone or a computer, you can participate in our platform, right? And so that was a big inflection point for companies to understand, oh, now we don't even have the choice. And then you tack on to that. If you look at big media out there today, whether you watch CNN or Fox or CNBC or CBS, it doesn't matter. All of those interviews are now user generated interviews, right? People are getting on Zoom and like they're on national TV, right? So companies are the biggest media outlets are seeing, okay, we get 80% of the way there on 20% of the effort with user generated content, right? And I think COVID, this idea of remote, the future of work, hit that, and we're fortunate like to play as that was a tailwind for us, right? And we're fortunate to kind of play into that as well.
Yeah,
I guess it's like Vine and TikTok, and now it's brought into all parts of our lives. It's not just for fun anymore; it's for all the things.
There's a
100%.
blend. I mean, I mean, so what, because it seems to me like this has become a priority now, right? It's very much similar to the diversity and inclusion conversation where, before it was a check the box or, maybe a nice to have, but after George Floyd's murder, it's now a priority, right? Leaders. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing leaders, executives of companies going, we need this. Like we have to somehow create an authentic relationship with candidates in this virtual world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I agree with the parallel from a D&I standpoint. I mean, we even have companies that use us purely for D&I, right? It's okay. Instead of putting a landing page up of what our D&I efforts are or what our employee resource groups are, and they're comprised of, let's have the people at the company that are part of these employee resource groups tell their story, right? And how they've been supported by the company, right? Again, just like humanizing an initiative that is at the company, right? Instead of through text or images. I think, an interesting point that you had mentioned was like, this becoming a priority and how it's become a priority, right? A big part of, the secret sauce here, if you will, which isn't a secret, is allowing companies to approve the content, right? When we're primarily working with Fortune 500 companies. Like 90% of the companies we work with are Fortune 1000, I would say. And they need, from a compliance perspective, from a risk standpoint, the ability to approve content.
Yeah.
And secondly, the other element that we saw was, okay, companies always have a platform like their career site or CRM that they need the content to be integrated with. So when we looked at companies that did this, besides us, they said, okay, UB, create your video. And UB would create his video and they would just sit in this library on the back end. And the company would have to manually download the video and upload it to the career site. And you can't do that with every, you have thousands of job descriptions that are open. You can't do that with every single one of them. So what we did, and this is more of a credit to our engineering team, was because we take in all the transcripts of the videos, because we can tag all of the videos, we can actually programmatically map them to the platform the company's using, whether that's the career site, the ATS, or the CRM. And that allows for companies to now personalize this content, right? Where, Nicole is a female engineer at the company. So I'm actually and she's giving her story. So I'm going to put her video on a job description, an engineering job description, so I can actually attract more female engineering candidates, right? Yeah. Instead of seeing a white man talking about his job at the company or seeing the CEO talking about his job at the company. So it was both this inflection point of this needs to be done, but it's also tactically of, okay, we're allowing you to approve this content. We're also allowing you to programmatically map this. So this is going to save you a lot of time. It's going to help increase your engagement and conversion rates as well.
Have you seen any what's the right word? Not backlash, but concerns arise from the approval aspect of it, only because, so, thinking before, that very performative things that companies would do would be like, let's put the black square on our Instagram because, to support Black Lives Matter, very,
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of diversity initiatives sort of look like, very performative
sure. Yeah.
spin. And so, is there a fear there that because there's an approval, and I get the approval process, don't get me wrong at all,
Yeah.
but is there ever a fear or concern that's brought up about, well, this just gives them the opportunity to twist my words,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There certainly is, right? And I think the way that we think about this is, okay, you can either, you can either give a free form, employee can say whatever they want, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
generally detrimental to the company. Like you see it with Glassdoor and like
Yep.
all the polarizing reviews that you have. Or you have a TV commercial, right? Which is like very highly produced and very highly scripted, right? It takes a bunch of takes. The employee might
Expensive.
leave after 2-3 months. It's super expensive. It's not scalable, et cetera. So what we saw was like, wow, there's a huge gray area here.
Yeah.
And there's sure questions to be answered in the huge gray area. There's always questions to be answered in TA, right? Like in TA technology. But that was something when you look at, impact on the y-axis and value on the x-axis, or like the amounts of work it takes, we were still sitting at the top right compared to all the other options, if you will. So there you do have to strike a balance between the company twisting your words or the company being inauthentic and the employee sharing their story. But that's why we have content strategists on our team that analyze the data and even understand okay, what makes a really great story. So you guys are probably familiar with Simon Sinek, and he started he wrote a book called Start With Why and Finding Your Why as well. And we feel like we're almost like the technology layer of that book, right? It's about asking the right questions to employees to invoke emotional and authentic responses. And when you ask the right second and third level questions, you're able to source a really, really great story and allow the employee to understand, oh, that's why I'm here as well. Which then in turn engages and attracts the candidate too. So we it is pretty scientific, and we don't just say, "Hey, employee, tell us about what you're doing today."
Say whatever you want.
It is like, why are you here, or what challenges have you gone through, and how did you overcome them? Like, what projects have you worked on with a peer? How did you fail, and how did you overcome that? So those are really important to ask and incorporate to kind of answer to that limitation that you brought up. Absolutely.
It's interesting that you bring up Start With Why, because most people who follow Simon Sinek forget that Start With Why was about sales. Start with why, so that you can get your point across to somebody, so they know what you're selling and they can buy into it. And that
I didn't even know that. That's good to know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so it is what you're talking about here, like gaining the trust of the person that you're attempting to share information with, so that they may join you. And that part that you're talking about, the authenticity, is the fastest way to gain someone's trust. Just to say, here's what was really happening here. We're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It's
that's a great point
that you've gotten through all that.
Well, and I think too, what that gets me to is what a great way as an organization and as a leadership of an organization to understand whether your efforts to build a truly inclusive place of work are working or not, right? Like you could tell pretty quickly how your employees are feeling and the inauthenticity with which they might be telling their story. I mean, that comes across pretty clearly, especially in video. That's why video, again, it's great. Like you can tell. And so it really can be, I imagine, an eye opener too for organizations to say, okay, maybe we need to step back a minute. We've got some things to fix first, because otherwise we're never going to attract the right people.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, some companies will come to us and say, like, well, what if I can't get my employees to create the videos? Like, how do you solve for adoption, right? Which is a big question that we generally get. And, we have many elements that we can take on to ensure we get adoption. So example, LinkedIn shows companies who from their who from their organization actually posts on LinkedIn the most on a daily or weekly basis. So and understand, okay, who's trying to build their personal brand out there. So it's fairly easy for us to identify. But then we also say, like, look, if you really struggle with getting employees to talk about their experience at the company, that is not a technology problem. That is a company problem. Right?
Yeah.
Like, let's go solve that first. Like, maybe we're at step 2 or a step 3 for you, but let's solve that first. And here's why it's important, right? It's important because, we talked about this earlier of, okay, this, Nicole brought it up, like candidates as consumers, right? And I remember we came across this, this notion of, it's called Brian Chesky's 11-star experience. So Brian Chesky is the founder of Airbnb. And his idea here was, okay, if we think about like a 5-star review on Airbnb, it is, I get to the Airbnb, I find the key easily, and the house is clean. I have a good stay, and then I leave, right? And I'll give the Airbnb 5 stars, right? But in general, if you really think about that, that's a pretty mediocre experience, right? So he extrapolates that to say, okay, well, what is a 6-star experience? And a 6-star experience is, I get to the Airbnb and the fridge is stocked with my favorite food and snacks, right? Yep. That's a 6-star. And what's a 7-star experience? Okay, so a 7-star experience is I get to the Airbnb and the host actually picks me up from the airport and drives me to, or I get to the airport and the host picks me up and he drives me to the airport.
I've had that happen. And then
there you go. And then you get this to the 11th star. So he gets like skips over to the 11th star. The 11th star experience is you get to the airport. There's a limo that picks you up. As you get to the house, there's an entire parade chanting your name for you. You get into the house. The fridge is stocked. The host has actually made reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and everything is laid out for you, right? And then you get to meet Elon Musk as well, like and
then you get the deed to the house.
Exactly, right. And so Brian's point here is like, okay, obviously, like the 11-star experience you can't do, right? It's inconceivable for us as Airbnb to do that. But when you back that up now into the 7 and 8-star experience, that makes the 7 and 8-star experience doable and feasible, right? Somebody actually picked you up from the airport, right? And so when we think about that from a TA standpoint, it's the 11-star experience for candidates is a candidate gets to come to the office, has a buddy that went to their alma mater, that gives them a tour around the office, that talks to them about their experience at the company one-on-one and answers any of their questions, helps prepare them for the interview process as well, right? But companies cannot do that, right? That's inconceivable. But when you back that up, well, now the 7-star experience is candidates get to engage with employees in an asynchronous way, hear about their experience, make sure that content is targeted. Basically, if I'm an engineer, I see engineering content. If I'm a salesperson, I see sales content from salespeople. And that's what we're trying to build, right? We're trying to build a 7, 8-star experience for companies to communicate and convert their candidates as they are customers and consumers.
I suspect you're not trying. I suspect you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, depending on who you ask, and depending on the day of the week you ask me, we're either trying or doing it really well. So
no, it's awesome. Yeah, we're excited. We're like I said, we're excited to dig into a partnership with iCIMS, and I suspect we'll be working with you all even more too, is because there's this there's this whole sequence of things that need to happen to create that 7 or 8-star experience. And I think we all are kind of lining up a really nice way to be able to do that. So awesome. Well, yeah, Alykhan, thank you, man. This has been a pleasure. It's such a, it's just fascinating to see where we're going and where companies need to go if they're going to grow more successfully, become more diverse and more inclusive, particularly in a post-pandemic world. And so I think, I love what you guys are doing and the approach you're taking. And I think companies, need to kind of stand up and take notice, because those companies who aren't doing it and who don't catch up are not going to be around much longer. I really feel like. So yeah, thank you.
100%. Well, appreciate you guys having me, and we look forward to working with you guys, and feel free to reach out if we could be helpful.
Awesome. Absolutely. And thank you all for continuing to tune in. A Higher Future. Check out the page for other great guests, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.